All right, it's time for a Shannon Reads Those Books with Of Mice and Men. Woo! It's a classic, an American classic. Here we go. All right, hey folks, it's Shannon, and I'm excited to share my thoughts on my 26 Those Books book, which is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. And this one gets on the list for being number 52 on the BBC Big Read. That actually surprises me a little bit. It's also 99 on the 100 favorite novels of librarians. I meant to check what's 100, but it's 99. Just made the list. This one was written in 1937, and I definitely could feel that when I was reading it. I also, another sort of reason to read for this one is my sister Susie recommended it to me, or she recommended Steinbeck to me. Hey Susie! Especially because of his writing style and his sort of like amazingly succinct, economical, frugal writing style. And you can tell by the fact that this is like 100, it's just over 100 pages, and it's pretty narrow. If you see it against a regular book, it's pretty narrow. So this was actually, I read it almost all in one go. I read it over 2 days, but the majority of the book I read in one day. So it wasn't hard by that standard, but the content in it was harder than I expected. The themes were definitely harder than expected. I haven't decided yet, but I might actually have to go to spoilers at some point with this one, but I'll definitely let you know, because it's one book where you really, it's sort of, I imagine it's really known for, something that is really a spoiler. And actually, the added reason I read this was because they talk about it in season 4 of Longmire, and I skipped over those scenes when I originally watched Longmire, and now that I want to rewatch the series for season 5, I want to watch those scenes. So that was the added incentive to read it, and it actually got me to go to my library because my local library had a copy. So when I renewed my library card, I actually got out a copy, and I'm hoping to go to the library more regularly. But that's a whole other ball of wax. So this one is set. Oh gosh, it's like, I guess it's set during around the time that was written. It's sort of like that Depression era. You can feel the weight of limited options, and people living in not great circumstances. And it follows two men who sort of they're not brothers, but people take them for brothers, and they're not, I don't think they're even technically related. They might be related, but the thing is, they act like brothers and they take care of each other. And definitely that's an interesting thing to think about in this one, how they take care of each other, because one brother is the one that does sort of like all of the talking, and he sort of gets them jobs and moves them along and makes the decisions. And he's the other brother, who's a bigger man, and he has they never say specifically what it is, and I don't even know. I'm sure whatever they would have called it then is different than what we would just how we would discuss it now, but definitely has some mental health concerns, and is very strong, but he doesn't always have great judgment, and is hard to discuss. Like, if you tell him, his brother tells him to do something, the man who is basically his brother, if his brother tells him to do something, he'll probably do it after a couple of times being told, and you get the feeling that he knows what the right thing to do is, but he doesn't always do the right thing. So there's definitely, for me, I felt like the real theme of this book was, in how do you deal with that? How do you deal with when someone doesn't make good judgments, and that? And that's for me, sort of at the root of this book, how much care taking is, socially acceptable, or like what is to be done in that situation. Like in this one, his brother really looks out for him, and he can definitely take care of himself if there's any kind of physical confrontation, but that's not how you deal with all confrontations or all conflicts or all situations. So for me, there's a real uncomfortableness in this one. For like those themes, I think those are hard discussion points, because it's one thing when you're thinking theoretically, what do you do in this situation? And then there's another, the reality of the scenario is that's a person. That's a person, and the communication level and understanding level, and there's barriers there in between sort of how they act and what is, expected and in society, and how society deals with when you do something outside those expectations, and the ramifications, not only sort of, like how that changes sort of just what's going on in personal dynamics, but there can be really drastic uh, repercussions for the other parties involved. And so those are tough subjects, man. Like, those are really tough subjects. And then, like, that doesn't even come into play with the fact that this book has use of the N-word, and I really struggle with that. And it was written in 1937, so I don't know how normal that was at the time. It was normally used descriptively, not derogatorily, but some characters definitely did use it in a derogatory manner. It's not the theme of the book, like it's not what the book is like is tackling head on, but it is definitely present. So I definitely felt that was uncomfortable, and I don't know how to respond to that. I don't even know how to engage with books where that's the case. And so I don't know, I feel like I need to do a little more searching into sort of how I feel about that, and possibly some more research into sort of like what was the expectation at the time, and yeah, like what was the author trying to say. I find that always challenging, because I feel like when I read a book I shouldn't have to research. Not that I don't want to research. I love research. Really, really, especially about working with data. I love spreadsheets and doing that kind of stuff. But sometimes, especially like when like this is a book that's written, 63 plus 16, so this is like 80 years ago, 79 years ago, like, yeah, 79, I think so. That's a really long time ago, so you don't usually have access to the people. The world has changed so much, so what do you do? So I find that really challenging. And then also there was only one significant female character, and how like she was treated and how she was depicted and all that stuff was like, whoa. Like, she really serves as temptation and doesn't even have a name. So I'm kind of like, from a gender perspective, I'm like, that is crazy. But it was that, at least from the research that I did do, that was intentional. So then it's like, how do you feel about a book on the whole where the only significant female character intentionally is a device and not a person? Especially when some of the themes of what they're dealing with are very much about people. So I found that the one thing I actually did find about this book is it really kind of made me miss reading books in school, because there were so many discussion points in this book. Like, you really could see different, how this related to that, and you could discuss this and analyze this and back up this and go through that. And there was actually foreshadowing. It is the first time I have seen foreshadowing in a book, or noticed foreshadowing in a book, that I can remember in the past 3 years, which is crazy. Like, I just don't know if I'm not looking for it or if it's just not there. But I'm like, I actually recognize it, and maybe that is some of the genius of John Steinbeck's writing, is that the writing is really, really well done. Like, it is so well written and so expressive, and it doesn't have to be 600 pages long to get this very strong story told. I felt for those characters. I felt for all of the characters, whether you would consider them good characters or bad characters. And maybe that's actually an entire other theme of the book. What makes a person a good person or a bad person? Because this, the character, he's not, is he good, is he bad? That's a whole essay. I am sure tons of high schoolers have written essays about that theme, and so there was enjoyment level for me on that part, but it did make me miss having those kinds of discussions. But in terms of the subject matter of this one, I did feel mostly uncomfortable about it, because I feel like we don't have a good answer to the question of what do you do in this situation, and maybe the mental health system has made great leaps and bounds, in terms of understanding, this situation. So I don't know. I guess I'm not going to go into spoilers because I think those who know and have read the book know what I'm talking about. And if you're going to talk about it in the comments, please just put spoiler, because for me, it really is a big one for this one. And I have talked to a couple of people about it who said that they had the story spoiled to them. And it's really, I think it's good to get the story as it is without knowing necessarily what's going to happen. But it was one rocky, emotional roller coaster of a journey. I am glad that I read it. Mostly, I would like to resolve how I feel about reading older novels that use the N word, and I am also thinking about in terms of the gender dynamics, like, do I feel like every book should have female characters that are like, fully fleshed out and stuff like that? Like for this story, it was actually kind of, I guess one of the points he was trying to make was that it was not essential that she be, she was representing something in particular, not an individual person, and it did really bother me, But do all books need that? I don't know. Like, so it gave me more questions, which is a good thing, but it leaves the discussion mind open as opposed to feeling like, okay, on to the next. So it's a good thing. It is a good thing, but it leaves me feel unresolved, which isn't always a good thing. But discussions are a good thing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the books. I know this one definitely people have polar opposites. I found it a challenge on how to rate it on Goodreads. I can't even remember what I put it. I almost wish you can leave it at no stars, but that always feels like a bad rating. I might change it later after I continue to think about it. So there you go, Of Mice and Men, for a little book. That was a lot to take in. All right, thanks for watching.